Welcome back, everybody, to Big Bookie, presented by Big Banner Sports. We do not have our regular host, Tyler Forker, here with us today. So the president, CEO, and founder, Brant Henson, is here to lead the way here and give you guys all losing picks. It's always fade the CEO, always has been, always will be. Don't listen to me, listen to Chris, and maybe if you're feeling a little risky, listen to Brandon. But I'm excited to dig into this, boys.
Yeah,
It's gonna be great. Let's do it.
So I know this week is not as fun of a slate as we had last week. We had all those big games, all those ranked matchups, and this week we're looking at Purdue against Illinois and just like, oh man, football. But is that really the most enjoyable game we have on the slate?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the closest spread because the next highest outside of that's like 12 points. So it should be the best game. And if that's your best game for a Big Ten slate, hope you like Big Ten football, baby.
That's what we're here for. We love Big Ten football, and we're excited. We are so pumped for that Big Ten West matchup out in Ross-Ade.
Yeah, no, it'll be fun to watch. I think Michigan, Nebraska is another interesting game for Big Ten. Two teams facing each other. I know Nebraska's not nearly lived up to what they should be, but could be interesting. Hopefully, Michigan State, Iowa is somewhat interesting. I think we get at least one good game this weekend, but I'm not sure I'd bet on which one it would be. I think it's going to be difficult, but
yeah, man. For anyone watching Michigan State, Iowa, you're a sicko. That's just true Big
It's
Ten
sick of
football.
money on the line.
Yeah,
It'll be a weekend.
Yeah, if you guys want to dig into it, let's go ahead and start off with what should be the game of the week. That Big Ten West matchup between Purdue and Illinois. From my perspective, it really feels like whoever loses this game kind of drops out of that Big Ten West chase. And the Big Ten West winner is probably going to have at best 4 losses, and that might even be a stretch. Just like overall.
All right, the Badgers aren't going to have 4 losses there. Let's slow your roll there.
Say that, but the Badgers just have
State.
not looked impressive. They could lose to Iowa. There are plenty of games they could lose. If they play Ohio State, they're not winning that.
Don't see it. We got 9 wins out of our Badgers.
I don't think the Big Ten West winner is going to have less than 4 losses. I think that's a stretch. Anyways, the loser of this game is probably done for the season. You've got Brett Bielema with the Fighting Illini going on the road to take on the Purdue Boilermakers, who have really been struggling under Ryan Walters. I know they've had some tough matchups, but they just haven't been able to seal the deal in a bunch of fairly close games. And fairly close is maybe a stretch in some of those, but they've got the high-powered offense. They've got the defense that's been giving up a lot of points, and they've been turning the ball over quite a bit. So, Chris, who do you like in this game and why?
it's a tough one to forecast. I think obviously in the past, Purdue's home field advantage has been so strong. We've not seen that at all this year. The defense and especially the secondary for Purdue's really struggled. I know Purdue burned us in the Syracuse game. They continue losing. I kind of like the Illini at plus money. I think Altmaier is slowly getting that offense going a little bit more. I think maybe not the most explosive, but this is probably the weakest defense they've faced in the last couple of weeks. It's a good chance for them to kind of get right. I don't know what Purdue's going to be able to do defensively to be able to stop that offense. And I think also too, Card's been really good, but when you're having to score 25, 30 points a football game because your defense is allowing so much on the other end, it's hard always playing from behind. I think the Illini gets out early and they kind of keep the gas pedal on them, and I see them covering and winning this football game.
Yeah, not a bad pick there, Brandon. What are your thoughts?
Again, we know how much I like to fade Purdue this season, especially after they broke my heart and cost me a lot of money earlier in the season. But again, I mean, yeah, the defense has not been great, but the main problem with this team is the turnovers. I mean, this team is turning the ball over 3 times a game almost at this point, and it does not seem like they're close to getting that under control. Illinois' defense this year has not been up to par from what I thought, but I mean, hey, if Purdue is going to hand you 3 turnovers and set you up in good field position, I think Altmaier is going to be capable of getting that ball to the end zone. So I do also like Illinois plus money because I can't trust Purdue, man. That offense cannot keep the ball in their own hands.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with both you guys. I think I'm leaning towards the Illini in this game, but I could easily see it going either way. The Illini have really been underwhelming this season for me as well. I believed in them against Kansas on the road. You guys were all over Kansas, and that is where the fade the CEO originated from. So maybe you guys should fade the CEO and go with Purdue in this game. I know all of us here have had our hearts broken by Purdue this season and are actively fading them, but we'll see. We'll see if they can get it done against Illinois. That'll be a fun game and definitely a big game for both teams. Next on the slate, let's take a look at the night game on the slate, the true sickos game on the slate. Michigan State without Mel Tucker and without a seemingly competent player on any spot in their team whatsoever, or Iowa with potentially a worse offense than they had last season, and that's really, really stretching it. And the defense has taken a setback as well. They're still good, but they lost a lot. The game is in Iowa. It's in Kinnick, so that's an electric environment, especially at night, especially for a team coming off a loss who needs a win to really keep things afloat. The spread's 12.5, and the over under, I forget the exact number, but it's low. It's very low. Chris, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think
36.5.
I faded Iowa a decent bit this year. I've been kind of anti McNamara. I've been anti that offense. I actually think Iowa covers this. I think last week against Penn State, they played in horrible weather. It was not good for offensive football. And I think that obviously that offense has a lot to work on and very little weapons, but Michigan State right now is a shell of what they used to be. I think Mel Tucker leaving that team's completely taken the wind out of their sails. I don't know what they have offensively to be able to even score. They've really struggled to even score double digits in games this year. I think Iowa should be able to go out after a big embarrassing loss and kind of take out some frustration on these guys, maybe run up the score a little bit. I know there's the big joke of their offensive coordinator has to get 25 points per game this year to be able to keep his job. So I do think that they'll keep running up this score and put some points on the board as much as they can against the Michigan State team. I don't see scoring too much. I could see this being a 35-7, 35-10 type ball game that Iowa really does kind of establish that home field advantage, which is, as Brant said, a tough place to play. And I think they kind of handle these guys. And I really don't see Michigan State covering many spreads or many people picking Michigan State until I'm proven wrong otherwise. That program, I just don't know where they go from here until they can hire their next head coach and get their new wave of recruits in.
Yeah, Brandon, do you have anything to add? I'm sure you're probably thinking along the same lines. What are your thoughts?
I am for the most part thinking along the same lines. I was a believer in Iowa's offense coming into the season with Cade McNamara at the helm. They've kind of disappointed me a little bit. And that's why I'm looking at the under. Chris said he'd like a 35-10, 35-7. I mean, that's 7 points over the total. So, I mean, Chris, if you're taking that over there, I'm going to be automatically fading you there. I think this is going to be at best, 24-10 at best game, 24-7. I just don't think Iowa has the firepower, even against such a disappointing Michigan State Spartan team. And I don't know if the Spartans score more than one touchdown, 10 points this game. So I'm actually looking at the under 36.5, and I will probably be hammering that total.
Yeah, the under is ridiculously low for a reason, but this is going to be a boring game to watch. Probably an Iowa beatdown. I like Iowa with the points there too. And I think it could be a get right game for Cade McNamara and the offense to maybe pick up some momentum because they definitely need it. So definitely rocking with you there, Chris and Brandon. Next game here on the slate is definitely one of the more interesting games to look at this week. It's a Big Ten East matchup, but it doesn't include any of the Big Three. You've got Maryland playing against Indiana. The Hoosiers are going on the road for their second Big Ten game of the season after losing to Ohio State in week 1 to play against the Maryland Terps, who really just beat the brakes off Michigan State last week. Talia's looked good. The Maryland offense has looked pretty great at times. And then you've got the Hoosiers, who are just a very interesting team to watch. I know nobody probably was watching their game last week against Akron, but it went to double overtime with
I know we were.
Kevin Wilson trying to get his revenge there. Almost pulled it off, but the Hoosiers were able to stay on top. They're sitting at 2-2 right now after a close one against Louisville. Um, so what are our thoughts? We got a 14-point spread with the over under sitting at, was it 53? I don't have the
50.
exact number, but I think
Just
it's somewhere
50.
in that range. Okay, Brandon, what are you thinking for this game?
Total, maybe not total. The spread is 14. I'd love if this could get down to 13.5 because then I'm going to absolutely hammer Maryland. I just think it's a mismatch all the way. I just don't think that defense in Indiana is going to be able to contain what Talia is going to be throwing their way. Of course, 14 points is a lot, especially in a Big Ten East matchup, but I just think that this offense is way overmatching that Indiana defense, who has improved from last season, but I just don't think they're at the level necessary to compete in this game. It might be close first half, but second half, Talia a couple touchdown passes gets that spread covered.
I'm going to go in the opposite direction here. I think Indiana's defense hasn't been too poor. I mean, they really limited Ohio State's weapons and offense. Granted, the first game under the McCord regime, but I was impressed by that. And I think they've performed well defensively. I think they played well in the Louisville game. I do think Maryland's offense has been very good, and Maryland's been a nice surprise for the Big Ten. Having them kind of butting it up in the ranks and being undefeated is exciting. I do believe 14 is a large spread for Maryland. I really think this is the best team Maryland's played this year. I outside of, Michigan State is not as good as Indiana in my eyes. I think this will be somewhat a little bit more of a test for Maryland. I think the other thing with Maryland too is Maryland plays Ohio State next week. I could see this being a little bit of a look ahead, a little bit of a, hey, we got a big game to really establish ourselves and take down one of the big guys in the Big Ten. And I don't know how serious they're going to take an Indiana team that just struggled with Akron. So I like Indiana to cover here. I also believe that the spread will jump up to plus 14.5 or plus 15. I do know like 70 or 80% of the public is on Maryland. So the more that continues to trend in Indiana's direction, I like more and more. I believe they keep it a close, low-scoring ball game. I think Maryland's offense, we've seen Tagovailoa enough years now to know that he's a very good, serviceable player, but I'm not worried about him lighting up defenses in the Big Ten. I haven't seen him do that to this point to the extent of where a 14-point spread, I trust him. So give me Indiana in this game.
Yeah, you know what, Chris? I'm going to 100% ride with you there. Tagovailoa, every year he starts off really hot against like Charlotte and Towson and all these goofy schools they're playing. Then they play a somewhat half decent team. He's got a game where he throws 4 picks. Maryland loses, and it's all downhill when they're like just sliding back into the top 25. They're maybe ranked 23, 24. They're at 23 this week in the Big Banner polls. I don't think they've cracked the AP polls yet, but they're right on the outside looking in. And this Indiana team is not the same Indiana team we were looking at, last year and 2 years ago, where they really were just not a competitive football team at all. This is a team, they went to the portal and got some guys on both sides of the ball, defense specifically, that can really make an impact. And I think this defense is playing pretty cohesive football right now. And I think they're, especially with the way Maryland has started against lesser opponents, they've gotten off to some pretty rocky starts. I think Indiana can really capitalize on that and keep it closer than 14 points. So I'm going to be taking Indiana here as well. And then one more game that we are looking at. It's an interesting one again, but maybe not one that's going to be that close to the game when all said and done. We got a 17-point spread on it. We've got Michigan going on the road to what's probably going to be a pretty fun environment out in Nebraska. Brandon, you've been drinking the Rule-Aid all off season, and you maybe have started to spit it out a bit after the performances we've seen from the Huskers. I know in the picks last week, I was the only one who took Louisiana Tech to cover, and they did it. The Huskers just, they run the ball. It's what they do on offense, and they were able to win the game doing that against a lesser opponent. But when you're playing a team like Michigan, you're going to have to do a little more. You're going to have to make more plays on both sides of the ball. Brandon, what are you thinking with this 17-point spread?
It only took 4 weeks, but the Rule-Aid is now going to be canceled here. I just They are such an overmatched squad. I thought Jeff Sims would be a great quarterback for them. He has been nothing short of disappointing. The team in general has just been disappointing. I think this is just the Nebraska way, the way it is now. 17 points. Is it 17, 17 and a half? I'm not sure if Michigan does cover that entire spread, but I think I'm going to look at the over at 39 points. I think off principle alone, I have to take that over, especially with how efficient the Michigan offense has started to look after the disappointment that was Bowling Green. And I just don't think that I just can't do the roulette. Can't buy the spread no more.
Yeah, agree on that over. I do like that. I think 39's criminally low. Michigan scored 30 points in every game this season. I think they've shown they can score and they will score. Michigan also hasn't covered a spread this year, and I guarantee every player in that locker room knows that. I think with how popular gambling has become, and especially on college campuses, as silly as it is to say, I do believe these teams are judged a little bit on if they're covering spreads and if it's a good way to gauge, hey, are they doing better than they should be or worse than they should be? I believe 17 points is a very manageable spread for them to cover against a team that, again, struggles offensively, turns the ball over. Michigan's going to have some short field opportunities. And I think they really run it up on these guys. And one thing to touch on, too, I think with Matt Rule, not great at Nebraska this year. I think they're struggling, but I'm interested to see giving him time. I mean, the guy's had a lot of success,
Not his guys yet.
success in the NFL. And one of the biggest takeaways I think all of us have had with this college football season, even outside the Big Ten, is just seeing how, giving some coaches some time and patience to get their own recruits in there, get their own guys in there and be able to build the program. It really has paid off for teams like Florida State. And I do think Nebraska fans long-term, Matt Rule is a good coach for that program and going to turn around, but it's not going to be a one-year rebuild. It's just not going to be something that he comes in there and shifts immediately. I do like Michigan to cover pretty handsomely, and I like that over a lot. Michigan might take that themselves. So definitely will be on the over there as well.
Awesome. Going back to the Matt Rule conversation, for anyone looking to get a more in-depth breakdown of this Michigan-Nebraska game, go over and check out the crossover pods between Sully Scoop and Victor's Nation. Those are our Big Banters affiliates for Michigan and for Nebraska, respectively. They both have an episode on there where they're kind of chatting with each other, dissecting the game. And Nebraska fans are getting antsy with Matt Rule already. They waited for years with Scott Frost just to keep getting the same old Nebraska. They're seeing what they're used to again, and they're already calling for Matt Rule to be fired 4 games into his tenure, which I think he's been successful everywhere he goes. Year 1 is never a success for him. And in year 2, that's where you really start to see the chain move in for him. So I think Matt Rule can turn it around. But when you've got the fans calling for Urban Meyer to replace Matt Rule, that was a legitimate quote from Jay Saul on the Victor's Nation pod today. So go give that a listen. Fun stuff over there. They're fired up. They need to win. I don't think they get it. I think Michigan covers the spread here. I think, like you said, Chris, they need to go out and beat the brakes off somebody because they haven't done it yet this year. And it's Jim Harbaugh's second game back. They struggled with Rutgers for the first half of the game before really getting going, and I think they carried that momentum from the second half over into this game. But yeah, that's really the only games we're going to look at. I know we've got a few other games on the slate. Penn State and Northwestern it's a game. It's going to happen. Penn State's going to beat the crap out of Northwestern. We're not going to talk about it.
Yeah.
I know, Brandon, you mentioned that James Franklin and the Penn State team was practicing with no music because they wanted to emulate the environment at Northwestern.
It's quite the environment over there in Evanston, Illinois. It's there. It's a stadium. The game's going to be played there, but it's just going to be probably about 80%, 90%, maybe 100% Penn State fans. So, yeah.
Yeah, our buddies over at the Wild Chat actually swarmed the field after that thrilling overtime win, and they said there were about 20 students in the student section that were able to swarm the field after that game. Just absolutely absurd.
That is awesome. And it's awesome, they get to soak that in and get a great victory. I don't know how many field stormings that team's going to have in them. I think that was kind of
That
a
was
crazy game
that
last
was a
week.
well-deserved field
Watch.
steamer
Yeah,
there for
well
sure.
deserved and great for the program. Losing Fitzgerald and everything's been tough for them. I don't know how many of those they have left in them. I think Penn State kind of runs through those guys, as you said. I think that's kind of a blowout in my eyes, but it'll be interesting to see, kind of how Penn State looks, Michigan looks this week. I know it's kind of a weaker slate, but now we're getting to the point in the Big Ten season where we do kind of see some upsets normally or see some close games. So I would be willing to guess one of these games this week ends up being a game that maybe we didn't think would be, whether it's Nebraska with Michigan. I know we all kind of think Michigan's going to run over those guys. Maybe they don't, Penn State could be a game. So it'd be interesting to see if like we can have some sort of, Big Ten upset like we do every year with one of these Big Ten teams. Is that this week? Is that coming in the future? What does that look like?
Yeah, no, definitely agreed. It may not be the most highly anticipated week of college football, but we're all going to be throwing money. We're all going to be watching. And we're going to have a good time. Let's go. Thank you all for listening to Big Bookie. We'll be back again next Thursday at noon with our breakdown of the week 6 matchups.